On today's show, spring training is rolling. And folks, even though the games don't count, everybody likes shouting that at you. It's spring training, it doesn't matter. Well, there are little itsy bitsy amounts of details and fluff and little notes to keep an eye on that we're going to talk about on today's show to help you get through it and eventually get to opening day.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Tuesday, February 25th. As always, I'm your host for sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Arraez. You can follow me at Javipeno, Javiipeno, on Twitter/X or Blue Sky. Feel free to reach out and you could be featured on the mailbag segment every Monday. We did yesterday's mailbag, so go check that out. Also, go check out justbaseball.com for my other related baseball work and whatever. Just go check that out for whatever. You know what I mean? We're close, guys. We're very, very close. Today's episode, we're talking about spring training notes, just some things that I will be keeping out for. And I think you should too, dear listeners, because I think that while you get so many, it's actually, I've kind of gone the other way. It used to be that when people hype up things in spring training, that'd be like, oh my God, can we stop? Can we stop doing this? And when people do the, wow, MVP season, like everybody makes the same tired joke of like, let's say Kevin Newman, that was a random name, like hits a home run and everyone's like, oh, this is the year. Like the joke that isn't great, It's like, when there's like a famous player and everyone goes, oh yeah, that Mike Trout guy is pretty good. And that Aaron Judge guy is pretty good. That type of joke, it just gets boring. Anyway, I'm getting way too off track, guys. We're going to be talking about spring training and just kind of the details that I want to hone in on. And I think that this Padres spring training is not quite as interesting as last year's, only because last year had the Jackson Merrill effect. And we thought Jackson Merrill was probably going to make the team, and we wanted to see how he fared, especially in center field. Answer, very, very well, right? Historically well. He's like one of the only 4 players in history to have the 20 home runs, the 90 RBIs, and hit 290 like ever in their rookie season at age 21, right? Like, it's just amazing stuff what he did. But that part isn't in effect this year. We do not have a, blue chip prospect that we're going to be like super oodling over. We have some guys that could be big time blue chip prospects that'll make an impact in the future, but not for right now. Instead, it's a little bit more in the weeds of details, and we're going to get into it, guys. And let's start with that. Let's start with the 2 blue chip prospects who are not going to be debuting this year. I highly doubt that they're going to make an impact. Maybe you could see a situation in which guys get hurt, knock on wood. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But you could see shortstop, or you could see catcher, especially catcher, frankly, because Lord knows the catcher situation is weird. I could see the Padres being aggressive. It's possible. Although I think that would be a second half thing. And again, things would have to go very, very wrong if this were the case. But Leodalis, Vries, and Yonathan Salas, those are going to be the guys to watch this spring training in terms of just getting excited, right? Like, this isn't something you should watch and be like, wow, if Yonathan Salas hits 600 for spring training, like, they need to call him up. He should be right there next to Campusano. No, that's not going to happen. There's a reason they brought in Maldonado and Elias Diaz. And frankly, I like those additions, even if they don't contribute on the Major League roster. And I still am wondering, like, why Yasmani Grandal wasn't signed, who I believe has still not been signed. I don't know what happened there. It's very weird. At least that those guys have caught a lot of innings over the past few years, so they've got that veteran experience, and I imagine that they're going to be helpful mentors. And all minor league prospects always talk about that. They're like, it absolutely makes a difference being with the major league team and just kind of being around professional players and just learning what to do. You know what I mean? Like, just figuring out the ways of MLB life. But in general, no, I am not expecting much from Yonathan Salas. I will say that with Salas versus Vries, I think the one that to keep an eye on for potentially debuting next year could be Vries, because we've seen some success. He had a 361 on base in high A ball against pitchers that were much older than him. He had 11 home runs in 75 games. Like, he's shown a lot in that regard. He's got a decent glove. He's got some decent power, even if not the most by shortstop prospects, right? Like, that's the other thing is shortstop prospects. I don't know if I always go to them for the ultimate power. I feel like third base, first base, some outfielders is more where that comes from. but also a really keen eye, as evidenced by the 361 on base for the strike zone, right? Like, that's what makes him, I think, such a tantalizing prospect. And by the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised if he vaults into a consensus top 10 guy, or maybe even if things get crazy, a top 5 guy. I'm really bullish on Vries. I just love his bat speed. I love that he's out there just balling constantly, right? He's been compared to Ketel Marte, you know, I mean, that could be a comparison. Ozzy Albies, Francisco Lindor, like these are top tier players, right? Especially with the bat speed. I could see him at least being a version of that type of player, especially as a switch hitter. And then Salas, he's, in my opinion, he's like the ultimate lottery ticket, more so than Vries, because Vries, I see for all the aforementioned reasons in his skill set, I think that Salas, it's just rare that you can get a catching prospect with this much juice, right? We haven't seen a guy get hyped up at his age. There's only been a few. You've got, Aaron Judge. You've got Jason Dominguez, which might sound bad, but Jason Dominguez, if I knew I was getting that out of a prospect, I would be thrilled, and we'll see what he does with the Yankees this year. But Mike Trout, Vlad Jr., we've seen prospects like this get hyped up, and it usually pan out to be a good player. How good? Clearly, I think people got a little bit ahead of themselves. Same thing with Jason Dominguez, but I think that Salas is a lottery ticket because he's way down the line. I think catcher development is a lot different and a lot weirder, but looks like a professional out there. He hit a double the other day. I'm really excited about this guy. If you're wondering, as many people might be, are these guys, aside from debuting, are they going to be trade bait? I think if the Padres are really, really good this year, maybe Salas is the one that could get moved just because his timetable is probably a little bit longer. I don't even know if he's ready by next year. But you need to get like an awesome player, and the team needs to be very, very awesome for you to do that. I would prefer not, because frankly, I really like that I don't want to break these two up. I kind of wonder if there's something to be said for prospects like growing up together. Someone mentioned this note about Jackson Merrill last year, so I kind of want to see that play out. Just having these two guys that have always played together, and if they make it to the major league roster, they'll have that chemistry going, and it's something that you can't mark down with statistics, but I think it's something to keep an eye on. I would like that, especially because the Padres have been trading a lot of guys lately, and it's not a guarantee, even though he's great at it, that A.J. Preller would just easily rekindle the farm system the way that he always does. So we'll see how that pans out. And frankly, Salas just a little bit more peripherals than results. He doesn't have like a high WRC plus in the minors right now, while Vries has had success there. But I will say that the Salas stuff, man, that athleticism is crazy. I think he has like 30 grade speed, which for a catcher is pretty awesome. So very, very excited, and just excited to watch them play. But in terms of some things that might make an impact and aren't just like, pie in the sky, dream, get your imagination going things. Let's talk about Luis Campusano. Improvement for him behind the plate, I think, would be nice to see. Do we see him make some improvements there? Do we see him kind of lift a little bit of the basement level value that he had last year when it came to being a defensive catcher? Because holy dear God, was he bad last year. I mean, the Hive, the Campy Hive suffered a great blow last year. He had a fielding run value of -13 last year. He blocks above average, -11. Caught stealing above average, throwing out runners, he was -4. Somehow, I think he threw out like one runner like early on in the year, and that was it. And I started like tweeting like a madman. And framing, he's got -8. Like, this is a really, really bad defensive catcher, and he can't hit, right? The one thing that he's good at is he has like a decent bat, he's got a decent swing, and he doesn't whiff or strike out a lot. But other than that, we're just not seeing a lot from him. And I think that's one of the reasons that Padres fans were a little bit freaking out this offseason, where they're like, oh my God, this guy was a mess last year, and we know Salas isn't ready, and you guys didn't re-sign Higgy? We'll see. Hopefully Elias Diaz, hopefully they can get something out of him, and I just think that Campy is, number one, can you just not be a ginormous minus behind the plate? Because that's what he was. I don't know if catchers, I'm not frankly astute enough, and I'm not experienced enough with how their development usually goes. I, for one, feel like I am always just waking up and I'll discover who the new best catcher is. Or you have a Salas, Adley Rutschman, those type of guys, right? It feels like the in-between guys, I never know. It just feels like I'll just find out one day that one of them is good. So with Campusano, can he just be a little bit better behind the plate? And if he's like a 95 WRC plus guy, and he's like okay defensively, that's fine. And you combo that with Elias Diaz, you can at least be okay that way. I don't know if you can win a World Series that way necessarily. That's something that remains to be seen. But can he get back to a little bit of what he was in 23? One can hope. But the biggest thing for me, how does he look behind the plate? How does he adapt to some of the other pitchers who are trying new pitches and whatnot? The bullpen guys, everything. And speaking of those new pitchers, we got to talk about that. What new pitchers? What can we see from them heading into this next season? I'm very, very excited to talk about that, guys. But first, we need to take a second to hear a word from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back to talk about all the goodness. And just like that, everybody, we are zooming back in here on Locked On Padres podcast, your first listen every day. Remember to follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. We just got done talking a little bit about the catching and the prospects and whatnot. Now let's talk about some other notes, and that is easily the most, in terms of a question that 100% we really like, the number one question for the regular season. It is, who's going to get that fifth spot in the rotation? Right? Like, that is easily the number one question. And frankly, I don't know who it's going to be. I think that it's between four guys, probably, with an outside chance that for some reason I haven't been paying attention and Johnny Brito is back and he does something well, although the metrics on his stuff have been dwindling. I believe he's had one of the lowest, he had one of the biggest decreases in Stuff Plus heading into this offseason, so that's not great. But in terms of who I think could get this fifth spot, I think it's between Stephen Kolek, Kyle Hart, Randy Vasquez, and Matt Waldron. That's what I think it is. And frankly, look, I know these guys aren't exciting. I get it. And I know this is where my Padres bias comes out, but it's not the worst I've ever heard of. The Nick Pivetta signing really did save this team in a lot of ways. It really did make it that you don't have to hope for a miracle from these guys. I think right now, my leading candidate for the spot could be Kyle Hart. He added some extra pitches when he was abroad, and it seems like everyone I know is like, this could be a steal. I don't know if this is going to be like another Nick Martinez situation where he comes over and he's just okay. I just feel like it almost feels like it'd be too good to be true, right? That you got this guy for like $2 million and he's going to come over here and be awesome. But I will say that, like, one thing with him is at age 32, it feels like you wouldn't make this move unless you're pretty excited about his potential in this rotation. He added a sweeper, which is always good to hear. I feel like the sweeper has taken over baseball. And it seems like his fastball, he's better at getting whiffs up and up and outside the zone and whatnot. Like, it seems like he's been able to make it rise a lot more and disguise it, which is exciting. So I think between him and Stephen Kolek, and I know what some people are thinking, especially people who aren't, super tapped in, and they're like, what are you talking about, man? Stephen Kolek was terrible last year. And to that, I say you are not wrong, all right? He was 27 years old last year, and he really didn't produce too much as you would think. But when it comes to his FIP really likes him. Right? Yes, he had a 5.21 ERA, and I was trouncing him because I didn't understand why they kept putting him out there. But I think what they're looking at is quite simply the fact that he has decent control and he generates a very good ground ball rate, 55.9% last year. I think that's it. I think that they're really excited about Kolek. I think he just got a little bit unlucky, and I think they're looking at this and saying, this guy can be stretched out a little bit. So maybe he has some potential as the back, fifth guy kind of starter in a rotation. I think he'd be pretty good. I think it's between those two are probably the front runners in terms of what the Padres are thinking. And I still like Matt Waldron. I know I'm like the only one on Matt Waldron Island, but at least we have seen it work. That sweeper, when he's hitting the outside of the zone and when he's hitting the inside of the zone with the knuckleball on lefties and righties respectively, he's able to get a lot of whiffs and just not really allow that much hard contact. The problem is that I think over time, I just think this is why the knuckleball has gone extinct. But I do like that we've seen success from Matt Waldron. And in terms of Randy Vasquez, I like that he seems like he's super getting into shape. It seems like he's been adding stuff. He's been working hard this offseason. And the other day, he worked out of trouble. Last year, that was one of his things. He can never work out of trouble in games whenever he lets some runners on base, which could speak to, when it comes to the LOB percentage, left on base percentage, that when you're letting everybody in, I'm like, okay, that's got to decrease at some point, right? But overall, I think that that's probably my hierarchy. I think it's going to be Hart. I think. We'll have to see. I think that spring training is going to be huge for him because we've seen some breakout success overseas. Merrill Kelly, Chris Flexen are some examples where they came over and they've been decent MLB pitchers, especially Merrill Kelly. So I think that he could be something. The age does worry me, but for the contract they gave up, I just think that this could be a guy. And there are other teams that were really interested in him once upon a time, right? Which is always, not always, but usually something that is intriguing to me. When other teams are interested in someone, I really like that. Joe Musgrove is the king of example of this, right? Like Orioles, Astros, Twins, Brewers, Yankees in late December, like those are no slouch teams, right? And I remember when Joe Musgrove was a trade target, everybody wanted him. Of course, they end up getting him. So I think that's what we're looking at in terms of the 5th spot in the rotation. I think Kyle Hart should be the favorite at the moment, but I would not be surprised, frankly, with any of these guys. I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't hate any of them. I really wouldn't. But I will say with Kolek, there's something to be said for having a 5th player in the rotation who's not going to be a big strikeout guy, right? I know that Yu Darvish is losing a little bit of his strikeout stuff. I understand that. But I think it's nice to have a guy in your rotation that just provides a nice floor. And teams look for that. Guys that can throw a lot of innings. You're going to produce weak contact, get a lot of ground balls into this defense that I think could be pretty effective this year. And just go about your business, right? So we'll see how that pans out. I'm excited, but maybe I'm just a nerd. In terms of other pitching stuff, though, do Nick Pivetta and Dylan Cease add another pitch? I think this is a minor little thing to keep an eye on this offseason, and I'm really, really excited about it because that could mean something for the playoffs, and it could also just mean, obviously, something in terms of, in terms of the regular season, right? So when it comes to the rest of this rotation, we already know that it's going to be pretty effective as long as everybody stays healthy, right? We know what Yu Darvish can do. We know what Michael King's going to do. Michael King, by the way, I talked about how Johnny Brito's Stuff Plus metrics weren't great. They love Michael King this year. But when it comes to Dylan Cease and give me a second. What's his name? Nick Pivetta. I think that there's a couple things. With Dylan Cease, reading from Dennis Lin from The Athletic, he's apparently added an arm speed changeup and a 2-seam fastball. According to StatCast, Cease hasn't thrown a changeup faster than 78 miles per hour since 2023. He's never thrown a pitch classified as a 2-seamer. So, look, can he add that third pitch? I think this was one of the kind of like aftermaths of the playoffs was everyone wondering when you're going up against a team like LA, when you're going up a team that's just killing fastballs, especially, like you need to have another pitch because you can't just rely on a slider, even though the slider is one of the best sliders literally in the entire game. Don't get me wrong. But for me, I look at this and say, look, can he potentially do it? It's possible. You know what I mean? It's possible that Dylan Cease can add another pitch. Will he do it, and will he potentially risk throwing off some of his pitch mix, heading into a contract year? I don't know. But it is going to be something to keep an eye on. I would just be curious because, again, he does have times where he gives up a lot of home runs, right? He does have some times where he faces the wrong team. But overall, he was so good last year that I'm not really like freaking out if he doesn't. But I would still like it. And random, but speaking of Dylan Cease, I know that, we get some comments saying, they're going to trade Dylan Cease. They're not. I don't think they're trading him before opening day whatsoever. Unless, again, I mentioned this on yesterday's episode, unless the Kobe Mayo deal comes in from Baltimore and they're like, screw it, we need another pitcher, right? And if that happens, I think it would be at the deadline at this point. I feel like they would have done it already. Like, why would you be waiting to do a move like that? So at the deadline, if Baltimore is awesome, maybe that's what they're thinking. But otherwise, I think they're just going to hang on and just hopefully be good this year and then get their comp picks back if they lose King/Cease in free agency. But Cease overall, I think it is also worth remembering that everybody gave him a lot of crap for that, but Michael King also struggled against the Dodgers. And also, it's the Dodgers. That's not a good team to look at and go, wow, we have a problem with Cease in the postseason. You know what I'm saying? I just don't really agree with that. Actually, I changed my mind. Looking at Dylan Cease's career in the postseason got me really freaked out. This guy has only thrown at max 3 1/3 innings. That's extremely not great, right? He's gotten lit up basically. 2020, I don't count. Whatever, he pitched 1 inning there, doesn't matter. But that is pretty, that's not great. That's not great. So I am hoping to see what he adds with that third pitch. I will say, again, though, he did get a lot of flack for the postseason last year. It's worth remembering that he was also pitching on short rest, and it's the Dodgers. But anyway, does he add a sinker? You know what I mean? Does he add something like that? Does he add something that can prevent, those big type of games? And speaking of sinkers, I think someone who even more needs to add a sinker is Nick Pivetta. This past season, right? Can you limit something? Can you limit the amount of home runs you give up? Because that is Pivetta's biggest question mark. And I think he can. I think that's why the Padres like him. I think that's why they got him on a decent deal. I think that's why new Ruben Niebla is going to come in handy. This is a guy who just has been needing a little bit of that extra edge when it comes to a third pitch, right? His curveball, not terrible, but it can get slugged a little bit, right? His cutter was disastrous last year. Don't get me wrong, it's not always that bad, but in general, he doesn't have that like third pitch. Can he add a pitch that generates a little bit more contact, that can put the ball on the ground instead of putting it in the bleachers? It remains to be seen. It's a little bit late in the offseason, right? So I imagine he's been adding stuff. I imagine he's been tweaking stuff. That's what guys do in the offseason. But I'm curious to see, does he start experimenting in a real way with a third pitch or something else, a fourth pitch, fifth pitch, whatever he wants to do, that just limits hard contact. You know what I mean? Add something else instead of just relying super big on the strikeouts. And I know strikeouts is what turns all the heads, it gets the eyes rolling, it gets the money rolling, you know what I mean? Like, it gets all of that, but in general, can Nick Pivetta add a sinker, or maybe even a changeup? I wouldn't mind a changeup either. Can Chris Paddock come over and teach him one of those? Because that would be great. But overall, sinker, get guys to chase on dumb pitches, and that they cannot carry out of the ballpark the way that they often have. I know that I'm excited about Nick Pivetta, and I know that Petco Park limits a lot of that, but can you throw that maybe on the inside corner? Maybe limit some of the home run power, or I'm sorry, not the inside corner, outside corner, so guys go to the longer porch. I don't know. We'll have to see. But that is the big questions. Do Dylan Cease and Nick Pivetta add extra pitches? That is going to be something to behold for sure. But guys, that isn't it for the rest of the questions. We've got a final slew of other questions and things to look at for the rest of spring training. I know I've been rambling a lot, but don't worry. We're going to wrap this up nicely. But first, got to take a second to talk about a few things from our sponsors. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, by the time you're watching this podcast, it's almost Luka Doncic time, folks. And when the game tips off, the NBA action, let me tell you, it's going to be juicy, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off and want to bet, what can I say? Or want to bet, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers, I don't know why I just blanked out during that. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And just like that, everybody, we are dashing back into the final segment of this here podcast at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, on Twitter, /X, and Blue Sky. Of course, reminder, we just talked about pitching a lot. I rambled a little bit at the end there. My apologies. What can I say? I'm really excited about this team. Or maybe it was that I forgot the difference between a sinker and a changeup. The world may never know. But first, let me tell you guys, when it comes to things that we do know, is we know Luis Arraez is a controversial figure in baseball lore, but I think he's going to be pretty good this year. And I think what I want to look into this, I think he's probably one of the few players that I do kind of care about watching in spring trainings in terms of the guaranteed spot guys. What I mean by that is, like, I don't really care what Manny does. I don't really care what Tatis does. I don't care what Merrill does. I don't care what Cronenworth does. I don't care what what's his face does. There's probably one more player that I'm blanking on. But I don't really. I don't usually care about those guys and what they kind of add. I care about Luis Arraez only because I want to see him maybe racking up some hits again, because he is super bullish on himself, which I love, by the way. I love the confidence. In quotes, I think it's a lot of problems for the pitchers this year. I feel like I got a new thumb, right? And that's one of those things where, does he get better a little bit at pitch selection? I doubt it. I still think he's going to be a super aggressive batter. But seeing him healthy and in action and just seeing him more aggressive, I think could be actually kind of good. I think you just want to see a healthy Arraez because, again, Arraez has been a very, very good bat before. He's always going to be a plus bat. He's always going to be a good player, right? Maybe he doesn't hit for power and he doesn't play a lot of good defense. That's the issues with him. That's what holds him back from being a superstar. But in general, what I'm looking at here is this is a guy who had 2 straight seasons of a 130 WRC plus. Can he do that again? I think so. Because last year it's important. This guy still had a 109 WRC plus, still hit 314, despite the fact that his thumb was a mess. I think everybody kind of knows that, right? Can he buff the walk rate up a little bit to what it was when he had those expert seasons, maybe 8.3% like he had in 22, and then just spraying the crap out of the ball like he did in 23? I know the Padres are confident about it, but I like Luis Arraez's optimism. I think him having, as he described, a new thumb is going to be big for this team, but can he be a little bit more selective? Can he add a little bit? Is there anything that they changed with him? I doubt it in terms of his approach, because this guy's been on multiple teams by now. I promise you the Padres aren't the only ones who have been like, hey, Luis, you should try and wait and see more pitches. You know what I mean? That would be interesting. I doubt that that's going to be the case, but overall, can they get him healthy? Is he going to be healthy? Are the rumors true that he is back at full 100%? Looking forward to seeing that. And I will tell you, when it comes to being a leadoff hitter, I kind of want to see how the lineup goes, because I think it should be Tatis probably batting leadoff for a bunch of reasons that we'll talk about at another time, because Luis Arraez does not see a lot of pitches. That's really important, right? He is a pest. Don't get me wrong. I love having a pest. But you get, Tatis to start things off, and then you got to face an Arraez, and then you got to face a Jake or something like that. Then you got to face Manny, and you got to face Merrill and all those guys. Merrill as a leadoff hitter, I could see that as well. But for Luis Arraez, need to see him super healthy. If we need the 130 WRC plus guy, if he's going to be the leadoff hitter, because he doesn't see as many pitches. But anyway, moving on. Other little things: Tirso Ornelas, Yonathan Peralza, Gavin Sheets. Which one of those guys gets a bench spot? Obviously, not all that exciting. I am rooting for Tirso just because the unknown is a lot more exciting, frankly. But does Gavin Sheets sneak in there? Does he become this year's Tyler Wade? Yonathan Peralza has been actually hitting the ball pretty hard in spring training so far, so maybe he has an upper edge. And then Tirso, I think, has the highest upside of these three. I'm not saying that I think they're going to be amazing, right? But overall, at least I feel like there's some hope with Tirso Ornelas that he's going to come in there and just be okay. I mean, again, in the minors, he's been pretty okay, and he's been really good so far. In spring training so far, he's getting a lot of walks, and the minors, he's shown the ability to be an okay defender and then just an okay bat who can see a bunch of pitches, get on base. So we'll see. I'm rooting for Tirso, but again, I want to see who kind of gets that last bench spot for the team. I know, not the most exciting stuff in the world, but let me tell you, a guy that is exciting is Eggy Rosario. Where does he slot in, I wonder? Not just in terms of the lineup spot, frankly, and how they utilize him, but so far he played left field yesterday as in Monday, when you guys are listening / watching this. He played third base on Saturday, and he played second base on Friday. Zips is high on him. We talked about this in the preview episode. Zips is really, really high on Eggy Rosario. He hit a home run the other day, or I think he did. I think he hit a home run the other day. I really like the guy. He hasn't ever really gotten a fair shake of things. He had a 125 WRC plus last year. I know that that's not a lot in 30 games to go by, but in general, when I know that he's got this crazy platoon issue, but I could see a world in which he's just this super utility guy that we throw around the mound a bunch of times, not the mound, around the diamond a bunch of times. And I think that he can just absolutely mash in the right kind of lineup. And they, at least with this Padres team, I like that Connor Joe can play first, so you can move that around, right? I like that you could just put Luis Arraez at DH, right? Have Jay Cronenworth play second. I really think that that's going to be important. And then Heyward in left field / Tirso. I actually think that there's some interesting stuff going on in terms of what to follow when it comes to the rest and the bottom, the what's it called? The supplementing pieces of this Padres roster and lineup. So Eggy Rosario, I'm really excited to see him. I don't think he's going to be a super stud. I think that a platoon with him and Arraez at DH is not necessarily, leaves a little bit to be desired, but he's got power and he's got a decent glove. I think that that's what's most important. So can he come in there and be really solid? Remains to be seen. Left field, though, I have to admit, feels a little bit like the Padres are like, can this work? We didn't spend in left field. We lost Profar, so we'll see. Maybe. God, I wish they had him for another year, man. Could you imagine? But nonetheless, really excited about him. And the last thing, when it comes to the bullpen, Sean Reynolds is a little bit hurt right now. Does he make the team? Is he going to be able to support all the numbers that he put up last year? And then Wandy Peralta? Is Wandy Peralta just going to get banished? Is he going to be sent to the moon? I don't know, because he doesn't strike anybody out. And it's really kind of concerning. This was a signing last year that nobody understood. And I was like, I probably am missing something. because he's actually had really good seasons before, or at least he's been better before. I think what's so funny about Wandy Peralta is that he had a really good season with the Yankees in 2022, and then he had an extraordinarily lucky season in 23, and then the Padres paid him and he was really bad. So I was like, what's going on here? His strikeout rate went to 13.6%, right? Yeah, his walk rate went down a little bit, thank God, from 13.2 the previous year to 8% this year, or I'm sorry, this past following year. But in general, I'm like, this guy doesn't strike anybody out. He's giving up hits. He's giving up a lot of home runs, right? Like 16.7 home run, 5 ball rate. Like that wasn't great. So I don't know what's going to happen. I think that Wandy Peralta, they're probably just like, how do we find a way to use this guy in any situation? Can we just use him as a specialist to come in and face certain guys? I don't know. But in general, how does the bullpen look? How do we get the last few pieces? If there was someone that was going to be traded, it's not Dylan Cease, it would be Robert Suarez. So if Robert Suarez were to get traded somehow before opening day, although I do think it's unlikely, that would say something in terms of the Padres bullpen. That would say we think that we've got some dogs in here, right? We think that Brian Hoeing, it's going to be just fine. I don't care if Fip doesn't like him. We think that Alec Jacob, he's going to be good. We know Yuki Matsui and Jeremiah Estrada, and hopefully if Sean Reynolds gets healthy, that those guys are going to be awesome. So that's something to keep an eye on. If there's any trade that would happen, I think it would be Robert Suarez. I don't think it will happen. But if he were to be traded, it also says a lot. Not just that they're, trying to save some money, trying to get some payroll flexibility, but also that they have faith in this bullpen. We'll see how it transpires over the course of the next month. But folks, that's basically it for right now in terms of my things that I'm looking out for in spring training. There are some general things I'm looking for. Is Bogaerts going to be more aggressive at the plate? Can Manny stay super healthy? Can the three guys, can the trio of Bogaerts, Manny, and Tatis all stay healthy, since they make up like 40% of the payroll? Can they stay healthy? Is the barometer, right? Like that's where we start. I'm speaking too fast today. Let me slow down. That's the floor of where we start with this Padres team, and I'm optimistic. But I think that this team still has some really good players, and I think that Tatis, it's possible he goes out and goes absolutely insane this year, but we also got to see. So, folks, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky. One more time at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. As we get closer to the season, I will be very, very active on all of those accounts, believe me. And tomorrow's episode, we might be talking about the Padres' recent history of pitching development and how I think they've low-key been doing really well there and haven't been getting a lot of credit. So we're going to talk about that stuff and talk about any kind of spring training action that we get, just to see if any of the questions that I posed on today's episode get any answers. So we'll see. Guys, we're really close, and I'm excited. I'm getting really excited. How can you not be excited? It's opening day. I can't wait for it. It's going to be great. But until that next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies, take care.